He accused the woman he loved of poisoning him. But the truth would shatter everything he ever believed. What she discovers next will leave you in tears. Hey, amazing family! Welcome back to Mr. James' Family Channel, where we bring you the most gripping and emotional stories that will touch your heart. Today's story is full of betrayal, shocking secrets, and twists that you won't see coming. I promise you, stay with us till the very end, and I guarantee you won't be able to hold back your tears. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The orchestra hall glowed gold that night. Not soft gold, not gentle, the kind that blinded. Light spilled from crystal chandeliers in heavy waves, catching on polished marble floors, climbing the curved walls, clinging to every white rose arranged along the aisles. The scent of fresh flowers mixed with expensive perfume and old wood varnish, the smell of prestige. People whispered when they walked, not because they had to, because this was the kind of place where voices learned to shrink. High above the main floor, tucked behind frosted glass and velvet curtains, sat a private balcony reserved under one name. Ing. Caleb Sterling sat in its shadow. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, Italian cut, sharp shoulders, silk tie knotted without flaw. Yet his hands rested too stiffly on the table in front of him. Not relaxed, not celebratory, tight. Below him, the orchestra shifted in their seats. Chairs scraped softly. Pages of sheet music fluttered. Someone coughed and immediately regretted it. Then silence. A single spotlight bloomed at center stage. Sienna. She stood there in midnight blue. The gown hugged her frame without shouting for attention, fabric falling in clean lines to the floor. Her brown skin glowed warm beneath the lights, almost luminous, as though the stage had been built around her alone. The cello rested between her knees. Dark polished wood. Older than both of them. Her fingers curved around the bow. Caleb leaned forward before he realized he'd moved. She didn't look at the crowd. She never did at the beginning. She looked down at the strings, as if whispering something to them first. Then she played. The first notes stretched long and low, vibrating through the hall like a held breath. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. People froze anyway. The sound carried weight, controlled, aching, intimate. It slid into every corner of the room, crept up balconies, pressed against rib cages. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had watched her perform 100 times. Private salons in Paris, royal halls in Vienna, a cathedral in Prague that made her cry afterward because the acoustic swallowed even her mistakes and turned them holy. Tonight felt different. Her shoulders lifted with the phrasing, dropped with restraint. The bow glided, then dug in harder, then softened again. She closed her eyes during the longest run, lashes brushing her cheeks. Caleb noticed what others wouldn't. The micro, pause before a difficult passage. The way her left hand hesitated for a fraction of a second, then corrected itself. How she exhaled sharply through her nose before driving into the final movement. Nerves. She was nervous. That was new. She finished on a trembling, soaring note that seemed to hang in the air after the orchestra fell silent. For half a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the room erupted. Applause crashed upward like a wave. People stood. Hands slapped together so hard they stung. Somebody shouted, "Bravo!" Caleb didn't clap right away. He stayed seated, staring. When he finally brought his hands together, The sound felt slow, mechanical. Sienna rose, bowing once, twice. The spotlight followed her. She smiled. That smile, the soft one. The one that wasn't for donors or critics or royalty. The one she used to give him when he came home late and found her still awake. Cello leaning against the couch, hair messy, eyes bright. The smile that had convinced him, 3 years ago, that he wanted quiet nights instead of chaos. Peace instead of fire. She bowed again, then disappeared behind the curtain. Caleb reached for his water glass. His fingers slipped on condensation. He frowned, wiped his hand against his trouser leg. Across the balcony, servers waited with champagne flutes and plated desserts he hadn't touched. Minutes passed. Applause softened into chatter. The orchestra filed offstage. The curtain rustled. Sienna appeared at the balcony door moments later. Her cheeks were flushed. A loose strand of hair had escaped her sleek updo and curled against her temple. She looked happy, breathless, alive. She crossed the room and leaned down to kiss his cheek. Warm, familiar. You didn't even look at your phone, she teased lightly. I thought maybe you'd fallen asleep. He didn't smile. She pulled back just enough to study his face. Caleb. He reached inside his jacket. Not for a gift, not for tickets to the after party. He placed a thin manila folder on the table between them. Flat, precise, the way lawyers do. Sienna blinked at it. What's that? His voice came out smooth. Too smooth. My test results? Her brows knit. Test results for what? He didn't answer. She hesitated, then slid the folder closer. The paper inside was stiff. Official, hospital letterhead at the top. She skimmed. Then slowed. Then stopped. The color drained from her face so quickly it looked unreal. Positive. 3 red letters stamped at the bottom. HIV. The word felt heavy even printed. Sienna's fingers trembled. She looked up at him, confused, almost laughing from shock. Caleb, this is impossible. His eyes were sharp. You tour internationally, he said. Hotels. After parties. Musicians hanging around you every night. Her mouth opened. Closed. What are you talking about? You're never home, he continued, voice tightening. Always flying somewhere. Always surrounded by people who worship you. I'm working. Working doesn't require disappearing for days. Her hand pressed flat to the page. I have never cheated on you. The words came out steady, convicted. Caleb pushed back his chair and stood so fast it screeched against the marble floor. Nearby guests glanced over. Someone paused mid-sip. Don't, he snapped. Don't insult me by pretending. Sienna stood too, instinctively lowering her voice. Caleb, please. I said stop. He leaned closer, towering over the table. I trusted you. I trusted you too. His laugh was short, bitter. You poisoned me? The words hit harder than any shout. Sienna recoiled as if struck. What? You heard me. A couple at the next table shifted uncomfortably. A waiter froze with a tray in his hands. Sienna shook her head slowly. No, I didn't. I would never. She reached for him. He stepped back. Her hand hung in the air. I love you, she whispered. Something cracked in his expression. Not softened, shattered. He let out a harsh breath. You loved my money. The sentence fell like glass. Her eyes widened. That's not fair. You married me at the peak of my company. That's when we met. You stayed when the stock doubled. Her voice trembled. I stayed when you worked 80 hours a week and forgot to eat. I stayed when your father died and you locked yourself in your office for 3 days. Caleb's jaw tightened. He turned away. Don't rewrite history. She stepped after him. Look at me. He didn't. Look at me, Caleb. Slowly, he turned back. She held his gaze. I have never been unfaithful to you. Her eyes were wet, not crying. Yet, the kind of tears that sit behind the lids, waiting. For 1 second, something flickered across his face. Doubt. Then it vanished. He shook his head. I won't be made a fool. He grabbed his phone from the table. His jacket. Guests were openly watching now. Whispers rippled. Sienna grabbed his sleeve. Please don't do this here. He yanked free. This was your stage, he said coldly. Seems fitting. He walked toward the exit. She followed. Caleb. He didn't slow. Caleb. The balcony door swung open. People pretended not to stare. Pretended badly. Sienna stopped at the threshold. Her chest felt tight, like the air had thickened. Talk to me, she begged. He paused. Just long enough that hope flared. Then he said, without turning around, have a lawyer call mine, and left. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. The orchestra hall kept humming. People clapped politely for a donor being thanked on stage. Servers resumed walking. Life continued. Sienna stood frozen. The folder slid from her fingers and hit the table. She lowered herself into the chair. He had left. Her legs felt hollow. The gold light around her suddenly looked harsh. Too bright, exposing. She stared at the empty space across from her. The imprint of where his glass had been. The napkin he hadn't unfolded. Her reflection in the polished surface, eyes wide, mouth parted, hands shaking in her lap. Around her, the room felt miles away, sound dulled. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathed once, twice. Didn't help. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look. She couldn't. She kept seeing the word. Positive. HIV. Over and over. Like it had been burned behind her eyes. She whispered his name. He wasn't there. Sienna finally reached for the phone in her trembling hand and saw 3 missed calls. All from Caleb's attorney. The moment Caleb's shadow disappeared from the balcony, the mansion he had built around her, the walls, the halls, the silence suddenly felt empty. Every echo of his footsteps seemed to linger in the corners, mocking her. Even the flowers he had sent for her birthday, a week ago, now drooped, their petals curling in on themselves as if they too knew the truth of abandonment. She had no idea how long she sat there, staring at the empty chair, the folder lying untouched on the table, the gold light now harsh and accusing. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. The next morning, the mail arrived like a blade in a paper envelope. Divorce papers, delivered by a cold-faced courier with eyes that gave nothing away. They were precise, immediate, legal, final. The words themselves carried no apology, no hesitation, no trace of the man who once whispered love in her ear. Just signatures, dates, and a clean official seal. She sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope shaking in her hands, the ribbon of her mother's necklace tangled against the sheets. Her chest ached with disbelief, betrayal, and something deeper she couldn't name yet. Caleb didn't come home that night. He didn't call. Every text she sent went unanswered. Every attempt to reach him was met with silence. The mansion felt like a mausoleum of memories. Her cello in the corner, still tuned, its strings humming faintly in the wind that slipped through the grand windows. She couldn't tell if it was the building settling or her own heartbeat pounding in the emptiness. 3 days later, scrolling through her phone for a distraction. Sienna froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The headline was unavoidable in its cruelty. Her fingers clutched the screen until they ached. Then came the photograph. Elena, icy blonde hair, pulled into a sleek style, diamond earrings sparkling, a grin that seemed to mock the world itself. Arm looped around Caleb's waist, as though she owned every inch of him. But it wasn't just that. She was standing in Sienna's own living room, her hand brushing against furniture. Sienna had chosen herself. Drapes Sienna had sewn, pictures on the wall that were once hers, and the necklace. Her mother's necklace, a delicate chain that had passed from grandmother to mother to daughter, now glinting coldly against Elena's wrist. Sienna's chest burned. Every inhale was sharp, shallow, as though she were breathing glass. She could feel her mother's voice, years gone, whispering in her ear, "Trust, but never let them steal your heart without proof." Proof what she needed now. And yet, for the first time, she had none. By midnight, she had booked an appointment with a top specialist, the kind of doctor who didn't just glance at a chart, but read the person, the history, the body. Like a story written in cells and veins. Her car cut through the rain, slick streets, headlights slicing the night. The world blurred, reflections of neon signs dancing on wet asphalt. Her fingers were clamped around the steering wheel, knuckles white, mind racing with one impossible question. How could Caleb believe her guilty when she had done nothing? The clinic smelled antiseptic and sterile. It was quiet enough to hear every heartbeat in her own chest. She sat in the chair, arms folded over her abdomen, feeling exposed and fragile, while the nurse drew her blood with a gentle, clinical precision. Not a word was spoken. No smiles. No consolation. Nothing to soften the weight of the air around her. When the doctor finally returned, Sienna looked up, ready for the world to tilt again under the weight of doom. The doctor's expression, however, betrayed nothing. Then a flicker of confusion. "Mrs. Sterling, your results are negative." Her mouth fell open. She tried to speak, but her throat seemed to close against her own words. "Negative," she managed, voice cracking. "You do not carry the virus." The doctor confirmed, eyes steady. "I suggest you ask who else might." Her world wavered, tilted. Something snapped, and then she could barely breathe. She had been blamed, condemned, exiled from the life she knew, from the man she trusted. And she was innocent. Every step home through the storm felt surreal. Rain poured down, soaking her coat, her hair plastered to her forehead. Streetlights flickered against puddles. Across the street, a massive billboard lit up the night. Caleb's grin, flawless and mocking, beside Elena's polished smile. Charity gowns, cameras, flashbulbs, perfect, frozen, untouchable. A shiver ran down her spine. For the first time, anger replaced grief, slow and deliberate, coiling tight inside her chest. She whispered to herself, teeth clenched, "I didn't poison you." But the thought that followed made her stomach lurch, cold as ice sliding into her veins. If not her, then who? She pulled her coat tighter around her. The rain streaming down her face and mixing with tears she hadn't noticed forming. A question gnawed at her. Someone had been careful. Someone had planned this. Someone had taken everything she loved and twisted it into a weapon. Her fingers went numb from the storm, from the fear, from the rising fire of determination in her chest. She promised herself she would find out who it was, and she would make them accountable. Not for revenge, but for the truth. The rain slowed, but Sienna's mind didn't. Every reflection in every puddle, every shadow that moved across the empty streets seemed like a clue. She stopped walking and stared up at the sky, at the clouds hiding the moon. She didn't know who had orchestrated this, didn't know if she was walking toward salvation or more betrayal. All she knew was one thing. She would not be broken by lies. And somewhere deep inside, a plan was beginning to form. The phone call ended, but the words echoed in Sienna's head like a drumbeat she couldn't escape. He's in danger. And it's worse than you think. The rain had stopped, but her hands were still shaking, the chill of the storm clinging to her bones. She didn't know who had called, but she knew one thing. Caleb's life was no longer his own. Someone had a grip on him, and it was tightening with every hour. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the papers scattered across her desk, the folder from the specialist sitting untouched, the legal documents, the headlines, the photos of Caleb and Alina laughing in her own living room. They all screamed at her. Someone had orchestrated all of it. Someone had manipulated her, manipulated him. But who? And why? By dawn, she had made a decision. She couldn't wait. She needed someone who could uncover what she could not see. Someone trained to read between the lines, to uncover secrets buried in plain sight. Marcus Hale had been recommended by a friend of a friend, a private investigator with grey hair, steady hands, and eyes that missed nothing. When Sienna arrived at his office, the air smelled of leather and old books, a quiet weight of knowledge hanging in the space. Marcus didn't smile, didn't offer pleasantries. He simply motioned for her to sit and waited, patient, observing, like he already knew the story before she spoke it. "My husband had another woman for 6 months," Marcus said, cutting to the core of her fears. Sienna's hand went to her chest. Her pulse jumped. "Elena Voss," she said, almost as if stating it aloud made it more real. Marcus nodded, sliding a thin manila folder across the desk. The flap caught the light, gold and sharp. "I know," he said. Then he pushed another file toward her. Sienna picked it up, her fingers trembling. Victoria Sterling, Caleb's first wife. The woman who had once left a trail of heartbreak and bitterness behind her. Quiet, controlled, invisible to most, until suddenly she reappeared, now listed as Caleb's health consultant. Sienna's brow furrowed. "She's not a doctor," she said, a sinking feeling curling in her stomach. Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, but she controls his medication delivery." The words slid down Sienna's spine like ice. The realization hit her. Caleb's illness, his weakness, the isolation, the control, Victoria had a hand in it. And maybe Alina too. Together, they were no longer just the women he loved or desired. They were threats, each with their own agenda. Sienna leaned back, her mind racing. "Find Elena's medical records," she whispered, voice barely audible, but firm. Marcus hesitated. "That won't be easy," he said. His voice held the weight of experience. He had learned over decades that some doors, once closed, were almost impossible to open. Sienna's eyes locked on his. "Then try harder." The determination in her voice surprised even her. She didn't care about the risk, about the danger. She had been betrayed once, but this time she would uncover the truth. If Alina had been planning something, If Victoria had been manipulating Caleb behind the scenes, she would find it, and she would stop it. That night, Sienna couldn't sleep. She lay in her darkened apartment, the city lights bleeding through the curtains, casting long shadows on the floor. Her mind replayed every detail, the divorce papers, the headlines, Caleb's laughter with Alina, the feel of his hand slipping from hers at the balcony. Every memory twisted into a question she couldn't answer. Her eyelids grew heavy, but the images didn't fade. Instead, they turned into a dream, a man drowning, thrashing in dark, churning water. His eyes wide, searching, pleading. She was standing on the shore, paralyzed, unable to reach him. The water lapped at her feet, cold and cruel. She called out, but no sound emerged from her lips. The man's hand reached up toward her, desperate, and she felt the weight of helplessness pressing into her chest. She woke with a gasp, sheets clinging to her damp skin. Her room smelled of rain and cold air, a lingering taste of iron on her tongue. Her phone buzzed again. No caller ID. A message this time. They are closer than you think. You need proof, or he's gone. Sienna's hands shook as she clutched the device. Oof, that's what she needed. Proof to untangle the web of lies. To uncover who had manipulated Caleb, and who had poisoned the life she once believed was theirs. She knew now that every step she took from this moment forward could change everything. One wrong move, and the answers might never come. Morning came, grey and cold. Sienna pulled on her coat and headed to meet Marcus again. The city seemed different now, sharper, colder. Faces passed by her without noticing the storm inside her. The urgent mission she carried like a hidden flame. She felt the weight of being alone. Everyone she thought she could trust had been cast aside, replaced by lies. Elena's grin, Victoria's calculated charm, they had invaded every corner of her life. But Sienna's resolve hardened. She would fight. She would expose the truth. Marcus met her at the edge of the city. Briefcase in hand, eyes scanning the streets as though danger lurked behind every lamppost. "I've started digging," he said. "But there's more here than I expected. Elena isn't just careless, she's planning. Victoria isn't just bitter, she's ruthless. Together, they're dangerous." Sienna's fingers curled around the strap of her bag. She swallowed hard. "Then we have to be faster." Her pulse quickened as the two of them stepped into the streets. Every car passing felt like a warning. Every passerby, a potential witness or threat. The world had changed overnight, and she couldn't afford mistakes. As they moved through the city, Marcus handed her a file he had just obtained. The first pieces of the puzzle. Documents, receipts, hospital visits, appointments, all pointing to a coordinated plan between Elena and Victoria. Caleb had been isolated, his health monitored, manipulated, even controlled. Sienna's stomach turned. "They've been planning this for months," she said softly, almost to herself. "They didn't just destroy my marriage. They've been destroying him too." Marcus nodded. "And if we don't act fast, it won't stop with him. It could get worse." Her mind raced. Questions twisted inside her. Why would Victoria, who had disappeared for years, suddenly return? Why target Caleb like this? And most importantly, what had Elena really wanted all along? Sienna's eyes narrowed. She had been blind, betrayed, but she wasn't powerless anymore. Somewhere in the shadow of the past, someone had underestimated her. And she would find out who. Night fell again, painting the streets in black and silver. Sienna returned to her apartment, files in hand, determination in her heart. The city hummed around her, oblivious to the storm that had entered her life. She spread the papers across the table, connecting names, dates, and actions. Patterns emerged. Proof. Evidence. A map leading to the truth. And then she found it. A note tucked in one of the files, written in hurried handwriting. Almost a warning. She is not what she seems. Watch her closely. He trusts her too much. Her pulse jumped. It was a clue or a trap. Sienna leaned back, exhausted but alert. One thing was clear, nothing was accidental, and every move Caleb had made, every step Alina had taken, every calculated smile from Victoria. It was all part of a game she was only just beginning to understand. Her reflection in the window caught her attention. Rain-streaked glass, dark eyes, determined, angry, afraid, all at once. She knew she couldn't wait. She had to act. Tonight, she would take the first real step into the shadows they had created and uncover what had been hidden from her for too long. The phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Sienna answered, heart pounding, and a voice whispered from the other end, low and urgent. They know you're looking. If you go any further, there's no turning back. It took weeks. Weeks of late, night phone calls, whispered meetings in shadowed corners of parking garages, and endless cups of bitter coffee. Weeks of Marcus navigating the invisible currents of power, influence, and fear that surrounded Caleb Sterling. They called in favors, bribed clerks, pushed papers through systems that were designed to be locked, silent, inaccessible. Every step forward felt like threading a needle through steel. Sienna waited in her apartment, watching the rain smear the city lights into long, distorted streaks. Each flash of neon, reflected off puddles on the street, reminded her of the life she'd lost, the life they'd stolen. Her hands were clammy, her chest tight, but she refused to sit. Every fiber of her body screamed that this was just the beginning. Hours later, Marcus arrived. Rain plastered his grey hair to his forehead, coat darkened and heavy. His eyes, normally steady and unreadable, had a flicker of urgency. He didn't sit. He didn't speak more than necessary. Without a word, he handed her a manila folder, thick with documents and records, edges frayed from being passed hand to hand in secret offices across the city. Sienna's fingers shook as she opened it. Alina Voss. The name glared up at her from official hospital letterhead. A test date stamped clearly 1 year ago. Status positive. Sienna pressed a hand to her mouth. The paper trembled, catching the light in a way that made the words almost glow. She knew, Marcus said quietly. His voice was low, careful, almost apologetic. She knew before she met Caleb. Her eyes moved down the folder to another page. Handwritten notes, typed letters, correspondence with lawyers. Settlement planning. Marriage timeline. Infection liability. Every line a thread weaving a trap she hadn't even suspected existed. Sienna read it 3 times. Each repetition burned the same, devastating truth deeper into her chest. She was going to sue him. She whispered, her voice hoarse. Marcus nodded, the weight of the reality settling between them. After marrying him, claim he infected her. $1 billion payout. The words echoed. Brought a chill that pressed her to the chair she sank into, her legs trembling, body slumping under the weight of the revelation. Not only had Alina destroyed her marriage, but she had plotted to destroy Caleb's life, his health, his freedom, all for greed. The cruelty of it made Sienna's stomach twist. "And Victoria?" she asked, voice small. Marcus exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath. She helped hide the results. Sienna's heart clenched. Her mind raced. Everything started to click. The control, the isolation, the medication delays. Victoria had returned to Caleb's life not for love, not for closure, but to manipulate, to protect Elena's secret, and ensure Caleb remained weak and dependent. The betrayal had layers deeper than she had imagined. Thunder cracked outside. A flash of lightning lit the city in stark white, throwing shadows across the walls and over the documents spread before her. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside her. "They destroyed my life to save theirs," Sienna whispered, voice trembling as she touched the folder again, as though physically holding the truth would anchor her. Her phone buzzed, breaking the oppressive silence. She jumped, startled, the folder slipping slightly from her hands. A new message from an unknown number. The screen glowed in the dark apartment. "He's getting worse." The words hit her like a punch. Her stomach lurched. Her breath caught. Not just Caleb's life, but his health, already fragile, was slipping further, faster. Elena and Victoria weren't just schemers. They were predators, and he was their target. Sienna's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Every missed pill, every delayed treatment, every lie she had witnessed suddenly made sense. She clenched her fists, feeling a surge of rage, fear, and resolve. She would not allow them to continue this. She would not stand idle while Caleb, despite everything, suffered because of their manipulation. Marcus leaned closer, his voice steady but urgent. "We have to act fast. Whoever sent that message, they're warning you for a reason. This is bigger than either of us imagined." Her chest tightened. "We need proof," she said, voice cold with determination. "We need everything. If we confront them without evidence, they'll bury us before we even start." Marcus nodded. He opened his briefcase, pulling out a series of documents, photographs, receipts, hospital forms, and appointment records. Sienna sifted through them, eyes sharp, scanning for patterns, dates, connections. The pieces started to align. Elena had known, had planned meticulously. Victoria had enabled, hidden, manipulated. Caleb's illness was being weaponized against him. She paused at a small envelope tucked between hospital records. Her name was written on it in a shaky hand, almost like a warning. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single page with scribbled notes, phone numbers, addresses, a list of appointments, and a warnings. "She is not what she seems. Watch her closely. He trusts her too much." Sienna felt a chill run down her spine. It was a clue, or maybe a trap. Every instinct screamed danger, but she couldn't stop. The clock was ticking, and Caleb's life depended on her uncovering the truth before it was too late. She leaned back, heart pounding, staring at the scattered papers across her apartment. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with tension, anticipation, and fear. She realized that the web of lies was far more intricate than she had imagined. One wrong move, and the secrets she was chasing could turn against her. One misstep, and Elena and Victoria would succeed in destroying everything she had left. Her hands hovered over the documents, trembling slightly. Every connection she uncovered brought clarity and danger. Every piece of evidence was a key to unlocking the truth, but also a beacon to those who wanted her silenced. Sienna pressed her lips together. She could no longer be the passive, wronged wife she had been. She had to become proactive, sharp, relentless. If Caleb was slipping further, if Alina and Victoria were still plotting, there was no time to hesitate. She stood, pacing across the apartment, eyes scanning each document, memorizing every date, every note, every name. Her resolve hardened. She would confront them. She would expose them. And she would save Caleb, even if he refused her help, even if he no longer trusted her. Every shadow in the room seemed to move, every noise from the city outside amplified. Sienna felt a tension in the air, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. She realized, with a sinking certainty, that this battle would not be won quietly. It would be a storm, and she was standing at its center, armed only with the truth and her determination. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She picked it up, heart hammering. The message was simple but terrifying. If you go any further, they will know. And when they do, there will be no turning back. Sienna's jaw tightened. Her hands clenched into fists. The game had begun. She spread the papers out again, tracing the lines, memorizing the dates, planning her next move. She would not fail, not now. Not ever. As she looked up from the documents, the lights in her apartment flickered. The power cut out, plunging the room into darkness. And in the sudden blackness, her phone buzzed one last time. A message appeared on the screen. They are closer than you think. He doesn't have much time. The message on her phone burned like fire in Sienna's palm. Unknown number. Urgent words. Caleb's life slipping faster than anyone realized. She didn't hesitate. She left her apartment immediately. The city streets, slick and reflective from the previous night's rain. Her coat flapped around her knees as she navigated traffic lights and deserted sidewalks. Every step brought her closer to the truth she had been chasing, but every step also carried the weight of fear. The hospital was quiet. Too quiet. The hum of fluorescent lights mixed with distant beeps and muted voices in hallways. Sienna's heels echoed against the polished floors as she followed the directions embedded in the message. One wing of the hospital off, limits to most visitors. Glass walls divided corridors, reflecting the overhead lights, making shadows stretch and twist as she moved. Through the glass, she saw him. Caleb, the man who had once filled her life with warmth, now pale, fragile, a shadow of his former self. He lay in a hospital bed, machines humming steadily, needles and tubes snaking around him like silent predators. His hair had grown slightly long at the temples, streaked with gray. His hands rested limply on the sheets, veins prominent under skin that looked thinner than she remembered. And there she was, Victoria, Caleb's ex-wife, sitting too comfortably in a chair beside him, a phone in her hands, texting as if nothing at all mattered. Her smile was too easy, too practiced, her eyes darting occasionally to Caleb, as though measuring him, calculating something Sienna couldn't yet see. The sight twisted her stomach. Victoria, the orchestrator behind the curtains, now in full control of the scene. Sienna turned away, nausea and fury rising together, and almost walked straight into someone. A small hand, a little body. She looked down. A boy, maybe 7 years old, brown skin, dark curls falling over a forehead too small to understand the chaos surrounding him. Wide eyes, unblinking, curious and cautious. He stared at her, then past her. Eyes locking onto Caleb, as though drawn by a gravitational pull she couldn't explain. "That's my dad," the boy whispered. Sienna's breath caught. Her stomach lurched. Her mind refused to follow logic. "What?" He pointed, tiny fingers trembling slightly, directing her gaze back to Caleb. The boy's voice was quiet, fragile but confident. "My grandma says not to tell him yet." Sienna stared at his face, his lips, the curve of his nose, the dark, expressive eyes. Every feature mirrored Caleb's, as though he had been carved from the same mold. Her chest tightened so fiercely she could barely inhale. "What's your name?" she asked, kneeling slightly to meet his gaze. "Lucas," he answered softly, voice barely audible in the sterile corridor. Her mind raced. A child, a secret child. Another life Caleb had never mentioned. Another layer of betrayal she hadn't anticipated. Questions spiraled uncontrollably. Who knew? Who had allowed this to happen? Was Caleb aware? Lucas stepped back, keeping his distance, but curiosity and trust shone in his eyes. Sienna followed him carefully down the corridor toward a waiting area. The quiet of the hospital swallowed their steps. Her pulse thrummed in her ears, each beat punctuated by the realization that everything she had believed about her life and Caleb was incomplete. A nurse appeared, her tone hushed, almost conspiratorial. "Elena's son," she whispered. "She brought him yesterday." Sienna closed her eyes. A rush of heat, disbelief, and sorrow hit her at once. Elena had brought him. She had concealed him. The lies now stacked like bricks around her chest, threatening to crush her under their weight. She could feel the walls of control that Elena and Victoria had built closing in, suffocating and precise. Everything she thought she knew, every manipulation she had uncovered, was now overshadowed by this revelation. The child, Caleb's child, was another secret, another weapon in a game she hadn't agreed to play. Sienna's fingers trembled as she pulled her phone from her pocket. She knew Marcus had to see this immediately. Every second mattered. One word. That's all she could manage. One word that contained the urgency, the shock, and the fear she couldn't articulate. "Child." Her thumb hovered over the send button for a second longer, as though waiting for some invisible permission to unleash the truth into Marcus's hands. Then she pressed it. The waiting area was silent, except for the soft hum of the machines in the distance. Lucas perched on the edge of a chair, legs swinging, watching her with those wide, knowing eyes. There was a gravity to him, a quiet wisdom in the innocence of his stare, and Sienna couldn't tear her gaze away. She thought of Caleb, lying there unaware of the scope of deception surrounding him. Weak, sick, vulnerable. And now, someone else, his son, was part of the equation. The realization struck her like a bolt. Elena wasn't just trying to trap Caleb in marriage, she had ensnared a child into the scheme as well. And Victoria. She had silently enabled everything. Their reach had extended further than Sienna had imagined. Sienna's stomach tightened, her teeth clenched. She had uncovered the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. But this was another level. This child was a living reminder of everything hidden from her, of everything she had lost, and of everything she needed to fight against now. Her eyes swept over the corridor. Security cameras, nurses, visitors, the glass walls that trapped Caleb in sight but not in control. Every detail became a piece of strategy, every observation a potential clue. Lucas tugged lightly at her coat. His gaze flitted between her and Caleb. His voice, small and cautious, whispered, "Will you help him?" Sienna's chest ached with the weight of the question. She swallowed hard. The storm inside her boiled over. Grief, anger, determination, fear. She couldn't allow Caleb to continue like this. She couldn't allow Alina or Victoria to succeed. She crouched down to Lucas's level. "I promise," she whispered, and her words, though soft, carried the steel of resolve that had been building within her for weeks. "I'll help him. I'll fix this." But even as she said it, a nagging fear clawed at her. How could she save Caleb when the enemy was inside his life, controlling his every moment, manipulating his health, and now manipulating the very child who belonged to him? Lucas's small hand slipped into hers, and Sienna felt a surge of protectiveness, responsibility, and urgency unlike anything before. She had been fighting for truth, for justice, for her own vindication. But now she had a new mission. She had to protect him too. The hospital corridor felt longer, darker, heavier. Every step she took alongside Lucas was a step into the unknown, a dive into the tangled web of lies, secrets, and deceit that surrounded Caleb. The child was the key, the proof, and the risk all in one. And then, from down the hall, a shadow moved. Not a nurse, not another visitor. Something deliberate, watching, waiting. Sienna's pulse doubled. She froze. Lucas squeezed her hand. She whispered, "Stay close." The footsteps grew louder, echoing off the sterile tiles, calculated and precise. Whoever it was knew she was here. They were coming for her, and for the first time, she realized Elena and Victoria weren't just controlling Caleb. They were controlling the battlefield. She turned her head slightly, heart pounding in her ears. Through the glass walls, Caleb's eyes remained closed, machines beeping softly, unaware of the new threat approaching. But she wasn't going to wait. She had to move first, think faster, act smarter. Lucas looked up at her, wide-eyed and trusting. She swallowed, straightened her spine, and stepped forward, ready to face whatever was coming next. A cold, calculated voice whispered from behind her shoulder, low enough that only she and Lucas could hear. "You shouldn't be here. He belongs to us now." Lightning tore the sky open like a blade, splitting the night in two. Rain lashed against the windshield, turning the roads slick and treacherous, blurring the city lights into streaks of silver and red. Sienna gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white, her pulse drumming in her ears. Every flash of light reminded her of Caleb, lying vulnerable, manipulated, and poisoned by the people who had once stood beside him. The mansion loomed ahead, colossal and foreboding. Its gates, usually intimidating, now creaked ominously, partially disabled by the storm's power outage. Sienna didn't hesitate. She drove straight through the opening, tires splashing through puddles that reflected the fury of the storm above. Her coat plastered to her body, drenched hair clinging to her face. She moved silently through the hallways she once called home, the familiar space now a fortress turned trap. Upstairs, voices reached her through the storm's howling wind, muffled yet unmistakable, sharp, urgent tones that sliced through the tension in her chest. "Victoria." Her tone controlled, almost cold. "Elena, hurry. His account's reset tomorrow," Victoria hissed. "I need the offshore passwords first," Elena replied, impatience dripping from her words. "He's dying anyway," Victoria added, her voice like ice. Sienna's stomach knotted. She froze outside the bedroom door. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain the women could hear it. Inside, Caleb lay skeletal, barely conscious. The tubes and IVs glimmered in the dim candlelight, his skin pale, almost ghostly against the crisp, white sheets. Every shallow breath he took made Sienna's chest tighten. Time had stolen his vitality, and the women in the room had engineered it. She stepped forward, careful but determined, water dripping from her coat onto the polished floor. Elena. Both women spun toward her. Sienna. Victoria sneered, a dangerous curl to her lips. You've got nerve. Sienna ignored the venom in the tone and knelt beside the bed, her eyes locked on Caleb's flickering gaze. His eyelids fluttered, recognizing her presence even through weakness and haze. Sienna, he murmured, voice weak, almost ghostly. She placed the folder gently on his chest, covering his heartbeat with the truth she had unearthed. Elena was positive before you met her. Sienna said, voice calm, but cutting through the tension like a knife. Elena lunged forward, eyes wide, rage flashing. That's fake, she hissed, hands reaching for the papers. Sienna held them steady, opening the folder for all to see. Hospital stamps, doctor signatures, dates, each mark a nail in the coffin of Elena's lies. Victoria's lips parted in a hiss, realization dawning. You weren't supposed to find that, she spat. Caleb's eyes, dim with fever and fatigue, slowly focused on Elena. Confusion, hurt, and dawning betrayal crossing his features. You knew, he whispered, voice trembling, fragile. Silence fell. The storm outside was matched only by the storm inside the room. Victoria stepped back, her face a mask of irritation and fear, realizing her control was slipping. She infected you, Sienna said softly, voice steady despite the chaos. And your ex-wife. She's been switching your medications. Caleb's gaze drifted toward the table, pills, bottles. The cruel deception laid bare. His hands shook as he reached for them, realization flooding his expression. What? He managed, voice barely audible. The weight of betrayal pressed down like the storm above, heavy and merciless. Sienna's fingers brushed his arm, steadying him, giving him the anchor he needed to face the truth. Every second counted. Every breath could be the difference between life and death. Outside, the wail of police sirens cut through the storm, a sudden, urgent crescendo. Sienna had already called them. Anticipating this moment, they were coming not just for the women, but for the truth, for justice, for Caleb. Elena's eyes darted toward the window, panic flickering in the shadows. Her control, meticulous for months, was unraveling. Victoria clenched her fists, the edge of fear replacing the cold confidence she had wielded so effortlessly. Caleb's gaze, weak but finally alert, shifted between the two women and Sienna. Recognition, betrayal, and dawning clarity softened the fury in his eyes. For the first time in months, he seemed present, the fog of manipulation and illness lifting just enough for him to see the enemy. Sienna leaned closer, voice low, intimate, almost a whisper against the pounding storm. I'm here. I've brought the truth. And it's time you see everything. The women exchanged glances, calculating. Their composure, once unwavering, now wavered. The storm outside mirrored the tension in the room. Each flash of lightning illuminated the fear, and uncertainty etched across their faces. Caleb's weak hand reached for hers instinctively, a lifeline in a sea of deception. Sienna grasped it firmly. grounding him in reality, showing him he was no longer alone. Together, they were beginning to fight back. Alina stepped forward, but hesitation slowed her. The police sirens were closer now, echoing through the mansion's halls like the approach of an unstoppable tide. Victoria backed toward the corner. The meticulous plan they had crafted for months, crumbling with every heartbeat. Sienna's eyes scanned the room quickly, memorizing every detail, every weapon, every escape route. She could anticipate their moves, could predict the chaos that might erupt any second. Her mind worked like a machine, calculating, strategizing, protecting Caleb above all else. Caleb's breathing was steadying now, though weak. His eyes, clouded at first, now held recognition. Trust, a spark of hope that Sienna clung to fiercely. She placed the folder carefully on his lap, aligning the pages so he could see the evidence firsthand. Hospital records, legal notes, the meticulous planning, the lies, the deception, all exposed under her watchful eyes. Alina's lips quivered, fury and desperation mixing in a volatile cocktail. Victoria's face paled, the mask of authority slipping to reveal panic. Caleb's voice, weak but resonant, finally broke through the tension. "I trusted you, both of you." Sienna squeezed his hand, anchoring him in reality, even as the women faltered, realizing their game had ended. The storm outside roared louder, a symphony of chaos that matched the room's tension. Rain pounded against the windows in heavy sheets, lightning illuminating the faces twisted with fear and fury. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, harsh and blinding after the blackout. The police had arrived, their presence imminent, their sirens cutting through the storm with purpose and authority. Sienna's pulse raced. The evidence was secure. Caleb was aware, and the enemies were cornered. But the danger wasn't over. Elena and Victoria were desperate, unpredictable, and capable of anything in these final moments. She bent closer to Caleb, voice low but resolute. "It's over, but only if we stay smart. Hold on, Caleb. Help is here." The women froze, realizing the tide had turned. Their carefully crafted control, months in the making, was collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. Caleb's fingers trembled as he clasped hers, his eyes finally meeting hers with recognition, understanding, and a glimmer of gratitude. Sienna's mind raced with what came next: statements, arrests, confrontation, but she allowed herself no distraction. Every second still mattered. Every move could tip the balance. Then, through the crackling thunder, a faint sound echoed, soft at first, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably a second presence entering the mansion. Another threat, another unknown element in the chaos they had survived so far. Sienna froze. Caleb's hand tightened around hers. Both women stiffened, senses on high alert. The storm outside was relentless, lightning casting sharp shadows across the room. And in that tense moment, Sienna realized they were not finished, not by far. A shadow moved behind the open doorway, silent and deliberate. A low, menacing voice cut through the tension. "You shouldn't have come here alone." The mansion, once a symbol of power, wealth and control, was now eerily silent. Rain still battered the windows, echoing like the distant thunder that had heralded Sienna's stormy arrival days ago. But inside, the storm had been replaced by devastation. The walls, once gleaming and pristine, now seemed like witnesses to betrayal, greed, and shattered lives. Alina Voss had been arrested. Fraud, reckless endangerment, manipulation. The charges piled up like bricks in a collapsing building. She had smiled through the chaos, confident she could spin a lie into escape, but the law had caught her. The arrest was swift, executed before the media could spin her image, before she could weave another web of deceit. Her icy confidence had melted under weight of irrefutable evidence. Victoria Sterling had followed, though not quietly. Medical interference, conspiracy, deliberate sabotage of Caleb's medication, all meticulously documented. Every manipulated prescription, every hidden test, every falsified report had been traced back to her. She had tried to justify it, to claim loyalty, to twist her betrayal into concern, but the truth was undeniable. She had conspired to control, weaken, and manipulate, and she would pay the price. The press descended like a pack of wolves, tearing through Caleb's empire with teeth sharpened by scandal. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire betrayed," "Mistress and ex-wife conspire to poison CEO," "Sterling's health crisis fraud, lies," and a hidden son. Boardroom chaos, Caleb Sterling loses grip on empire. Cameras captured the empty hallways, the closed doors, the once pristine boardroom now abandoned in panic. Stocks tumbled. Board members resigned in waves, either out of fear, self-preservation, or disbelief. The empire Caleb had built over decades was unraveling faster than any hurricane or storm he had faced. Wall Street analysts whispered about insolvency, investors fled. The Sterling name, once synonymous with wealth and control, now carried the weight of betrayal, illness, and scandal. Lucas, the boy who had appeared in the hospital corridor like a ghost of truth, was taken into protective custody. DNA tests confirmed what Sienna had feared and what she hadn't known how to feel. He was Caleb's son, Caleb's flesh and blood, a living, breathing testament to love, betrayal, and secrecy. Yet, even as the world around him crumbled, Caleb barely noticed. He lay in the hospital bed, skeletal, pale, his eyes hollow, fixed on an empty chair beside him. That chair had once held warmth, comfort, love, and loyalty. It now held absence, a silence louder than any siren or storm. Sienna visited him once. Her presence was deliberate, measured, a careful balance of emotion and restraint. She stepped into the room quietly, closing the door behind her, allowing the world to fade. Caleb's eyes lifted, recognizing her immediately. Weak hands reached for her, trembling slightly, a silent plea that spoke of regret, longing, and vulnerability. "I was wrong," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse, from illness, from weeks of silence and isolation. She didn't take his hand. Her fingers hovered, just inches from his, a boundary forged by betrayal and pain. She had been loyal, unwavering, but she would not allow past wounds to heal with a gesture of pity. "You didn't ask if I was innocent," she said, calm but pointed. Her words hung in the air, heavier than any accusation. Caleb swallowed, his Adam's apple moving painfully. "I was angry," he admitted. Vulnerability softened his features, etched by illness and regret. She nodded slowly, the smallest hint of acknowledgement crossing her face. "And I was loyal." The room was quiet. Rain pattered against the windows, a soft accompaniment to the weight between them. Caleb's eyes searched hers, desperate, pleading. "Stay," he whispered, fragile, uncertain, a child behind the mask of a man who had once controlled everything. She stood. A single movement, deliberate, graceful, and final. The word left her lips like a hammer striking steel. "Goodbye, Caleb." It landed heavier than any diagnosis ever had, heavier than betrayal, heavier than death itself. He reached, weak, faltering, but her hand was gone. Her figure retreated toward the door, leaving him in the bed that had held his pain, his regret, and his reflection on choices made. Caleb's gaze followed her, unblinking, haunted. His empire was gone. His health weakened. His son in protective custody. And the woman he loved, the woman who had carried his loyalty and truth, was leaving him. The weight of it pressed against his chest, suffocating and relentless. Sienna walked through the hallway, the storm outside now quiet, but replaced by the chaos of consequence. Every step echoed, a rhythm of resolve and finality. She had given him the truth, laid bare the betrayal, and protected what mattered most. Yet leaving him was a wound she would carry as long as she lived. Caleb stared at the empty chair. His mind replayed every betrayal, every false smile, every manipulated moment. The image of Alina smiling in his mansion, Lucas's small face, Victoria's cold gaze, all burned into memory. He realized he had lost everything that truly mattered, not to chance, but to deliberate cruelty and his own failings. He touched the bed sheets where Sienna had left the folder, running his fingers over the edges of the papers. Hospital records, legal notes, evidence, proof of deception. He had seen the truth too late. He had believed what he wanted, trusted what he desired. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle. A new dawn approached, pale light filtering through the mansion's windows. But inside Caleb, the billionaire, the man who once commanded the world with a flick of his hand, remained broken. He could rebuild the empire, perhaps. But the heart, the loyalty, the connection he had destroyed with doubt and anger, those would never return. Lucas, unaware of the complexity surrounding him, sat in protective custody, a living reminder of what had been stolen and what remained. A child of innocence amidst the ruins of adult deceit. Caleb's breath hitched. A new understanding dawned, bitter and sharp. The woman who had loved him, the woman who had protected him, had finally walked away. And he could do nothing but stare, powerless, as the consequences of betrayal, manipulation, and his own blindness settled like dust over his life. He closed his eyes briefly, a single tear escaping, tracing a path down his hollow cheek. Every empire, every fortune, every calculated risk, meaningless without trust, without loyalty, without love. Outside, the world waited, watching, hungry for scandal and resolution. Inside, Caleb realized the stark truth. He had been a king only in appearance. And even kings fall when the foundations of their lives are built on lies. The mansion, silent and heavy, seemed to breathe along with him. Each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of wind through the broken gates, a testament to loss. Caleb's eyes opened again. Focused, sharp but hollow. He was alive but broken, rich but alone, powerful but powerless. Sienna's steps faded down the hallway, a heartbeat away from the door. Her hand had left his. Her presence was gone, but the weight of her loyalty lingered like an echo, haunting the man who had once controlled everything. The empire had collapsed. The conspirators were arrested. The son was safe. The truth revealed. Yet in the silence, Caleb realized that some losses could never be repaired. Some bridges could never be crossed again. Some hearts, no matter how desperate, could never return. The storm had passed, but the ruins remained. And Caleb, The man who had once stood above all, now understood the bitterest truth of old: some falls are permanent, and some ghosts never leave. A letter arrived at Caleb's hospital room that evening, unsigned, sealed with a crimson stamp. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a single line, written in careful, deliberate handwriting. "You are free to rebuild, but she will never forgive." 2 years had passed, but Sienna could feel it in the rhythm of her mornings, the weight of her sighs, the way the air smelled after rain. New Orleans carried life differently from the cold marble halls of Caleb's world. Here, music floated in the streets, drifting out of open windows, mixing with the scent of wet earth and the faint aroma of baked bread. Her school occupied a converted church, high ceilings and stained glass windows that caught the sunlight like liquid jewels. The children ran and played between corridors that once echoed sermons, now filled with the laughter and the clatter of music. Violins screeched in practice. Pianos hummed under tentative fingers, and the gentle thrum of cellos anchored the chaos. It was alive, chaotic, real. Sienna moved among them with quiet authority. No diamonds, no silk dresses, no socialite titles. Just a worn jacket over simple clothes, hair tied back loosely, eyes alert to every child's need. She smiled at a boy struggling with a scale, correcting him with patience and warmth, her touch gentle but firm. This was her kingdom now, not wealth, not power, but care, music, and love given freely. Outside the school gate, the sky had darkened, clouds rolling in thick and low. Rain began to fall in soft sheets, tapping against the pavement and dripping from the iron gates. A figure lingered there, coat soaked through, shoulders hunched against the chill. A man, Caleb Sterling. The empire was gone. Headlines no longer heralded his name. The sharp suits, the manicured hair, the commanding presence, all replaced with the quiet vulnerability of a man who had lost everything he thought he wanted. In his hands, a small bouquet of flowers, damp from the rain, petals bent and fragile. His eyes, still blue, still piercing, scanned the children, the building, and finally rested on her. Sienna's chest tightened. Her heart remembered, even as her mind tried to deny. She had walked away from him, left him with the consequences of betrayal and his own mistakes. She had protected him, even as he had failed to see the truth, even as his mistakes had nearly destroyed them both. Yet seeing him now, drenched, fragile, but undeniably present, brought a mixture of sorrow and strange, quiet relief. Through the window, she watched him step closer to the gate, hands trembling slightly, gripping the flowers like a lifeline. His presence was both familiar and alien, a ghost of a past life intruding on the life she had built with careful hands. Their eyes met. For a long moment, the world narrowed to that gaze. Memories spilled unbidden the orchestra hall, the folder of lies, the hospital corridors, the small, trusting hand of Lucas, the storm, the betrayal, the heartbreak. All of it condensed into a single line between them, silent but roaring with emotion. Caleb's expression shifted: hope, fear, remorse. He had written hundreds of letters in the months after she left. Hundreds. Each carefully considered, each detailing apology, reflection, and longing. She had never opened them. She had not wanted to be swayed by words after betrayal. But now, seeing him standing there, she wondered briefly if he had changed, or if the man before her was still the same, haunted, desperate version she had once known. He stepped closer to the gate, holding the flowers like an offering, voice barely a whisper to the rain. "Sienna." She didn't respond. Not yet. Her hands were steady on the window frame, watching, analyzing, remembering. The calm, unwavering loyalty she had given him. The careful decisions she had made to protect him and herself. They all demanded respect, boundaries, and time. The children inside continued their chaotic practice, unaware of the delicate tension unfolding outside. A boy hit a wrong note, a violin squealed, and Sienna's lips curved slightly in a patient smile. She would not let the past, no matter how large, disrupt the present she had built. Caleb adjusted the flowers in his hand, wet petals pressing together, fragile, vulnerable. His eyes searched hers, silently begging for a recognition that went beyond words. Sienna inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of forgiveness settle in her chest. Not love, not anger, but recognition, acceptance. A nod that said, "I see you. I acknowledge what you are, but this life is mine now." She gave him the small nod, deliberate, measured. The kind of nod that carried everything unspoken between them: loyalty, truth, respect, pain, closure. And then she closed the curtain. The gesture was final. Caleb remained outside, rain soaking through his coat, flowers bending under the weight of water. He was a man who had once had it all: the empire, the wealth, the control, the woman he loved. Now he had only silence. Standing alone on the wet pavement, watching a life he could no longer touch. He didn't move for a long moment, just stood in the rain, the city humming faintly behind him. Memories of laughter, betrayal, hope, heartbreak, all collided in his mind like a storm that refused to pass. He realized then that some bridges, no matter how desperately one wants to cross them, were burned. Some hearts, no matter how deeply one loved them, would never return. The flowers in his hand drooped further. He let them fall to the pavement with a soft splash, petals scattering, carried away by the wind and the water. A small, quiet surrender. Sienna, inside the music school, continued teaching. Her eyes, though focused on the children, held the faintest memory of him in the corner of her mind. She had made peace with the past, claimed her life, and created something enduring. Something meaningful. Something alive. Caleb turned slowly, stepping back into the shadows of the rainy streets. He paused, glanced one last time at the school, at her, at the life he could no longer hold. A billionaire with everything once, and now only silence. He walked away, each step measured, deliberate, weighted with remorse and longing. He had lost her, lost the empire, lost control. But he had learned. He had survived. He had witnessed the strength of a woman who loved, yet could walk away from betrayal and deceit. The rain continued to fall, mingling with his tears. For the first time in years, he felt the emptiness of power without love, and it was deafening. Yet in that emptiness, a strange clarity emerged. He had been a king of the world. He had lost everything, but he could live. He could reflect. He could honor the loyalty he had been blind to. And perhaps, in some distant, quiet way, he could learn to be better. Sienna stood at the window, guiding a child's hands over the strings of a cello. She glanced briefly at the empty street outside, the memory of a man standing in the rain fading like a ghost. A small smile touched her lips, not joy, not triumph, but peace. She had survived. She had protected. she had forgiven. Caleb's silhouette disappeared into the misty streets of New Orleans. The world moved on, but the echo of their shared past lingered. A ghost outside a window, a story of love, betrayal, loyalty, and redemption, haunting both of them in different ways, shaping the rest of their lives. And as the last notes of a child's violin floated through the converted church, Sienna whispered to herself, soft and resolute, "I am free." A single envelope slid under the school door moments later, soaked at the edges. Sienna picked it up, hesitated, and opened it. Inside was a single line of writing, faint but unmistakable. "I will never stop watching, never stop hoping, until the day you let me back in." Her hand trembled, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small, bitter smile.